Hello and welcome to Emsi Webinars. We're really excited to have you with us today. We have Andy Durman, the Managing Director of Emsi, who is with us today, and also Alex Warner from South Central Institute of Technology. If you have any questions during the course of the webinar, please put it into the control panel where it says questions, and we'll endeavour to get to those at the end of the presentation. Just so you know that I will be sending you the recording of this webinar and also the slides when the webinar has finished. So you can feel free to share that with any colleagues that can't attend today. So without any further ado, I'd like to just introduce Andy. Hi, Andy.
Hi, Debbie. Thank you very much. And hello, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar. Very excited to be supporting Alex and the work of the South Central Institute of Technology. A little bit of introduction. So Alex is going to tell us a bit about Institutes of Technology more generally in a moment. And I will be sharing some findings of a new report we've undertaken on behalf of the Institute of Technology to shed light on the key labour market strands that they're focused towards, the digital pathways analysis. So we'll dig into some analysis of the data and share some of those findings of a report that will be published very soon. And I believe you'll all get a copy of that report in follow-up to this session. And then Alex will take over and talk about the Institute of Technology itself and how it's going to respond to the research and the work we've done and its goals going forward. We are just going to pause for a moment. We're just waiting for Alex to join us as we work through some technical challenges. So if we just bear with me a second, hopefully we'll get Alex in here very soon. Of course, if not, then I'm going to have to go well above and beyond my calling and see if I can help out by filling in some of the blanks as we go. So apologies for the slow start, but we should be in full working order very soon. Okay, well, we're still waiting on Alex to join us, and I believe it is very imminent that he will be joining us. I'll make a start anyway in working through some of the findings of the report, and hopefully Alex can come in and talk a bit about the IoT itself, and we can revisit some of those items. So just to get going then, what are the Institutes of Technology? A number of IoTs were announced a few years ago in terms of sector-specific focus strands of technical education that are really going to drive the flagship of a new generation of labour market connected education activity across further and higher education strands. And the South Central Institute of Technology is one of the first 12 that have been announced. We will, of course, have Alex tell us a bit more about the specifics, but one of the key elements to the Institute of Technology approach is to really solidify the collaboration between education provision, particularly across further and higher education, and the employer community, really trying to bridge that gap between education and employment. And why am I addressing this topic? Well, we're very excited that EMSI is one such member of the employer community that is supporting the South Central Institute of Technology, and it is really about an opportunity for us to bring some of this work around understanding the labour market to feed into the partnership with the college. The real core focus geographically of the South Central Institute of Technology is really looking at that labour market belt between Cambridge and Oxford, with Milton Keynes very much core and central to that region, connected through a number of key transport initiatives and economic development initiatives, and really puts the IoT based in and around the Milton Keynes area in a good location to meet that employment band. We'll have Alex hopefully join us to talk a little bit more specifically about the Institute of Technology itself. He can do a significantly better job than I on that one, but really the core aims do align very nicely with hopefully some of the research I'll be sharing with you today. Number one, for front and center, really is about plugging that digital skills gap, and it's certainly times like these and more recently that we realize that there is it remains a big gap to plug, and that our economy really is becoming ever more reliant on digital skills, and so it's really exciting to hear of the key focus of the IoT to really kind of work to plug those gaps through understanding key business needs, and ultimately developing a workforce, a talented workforce that can really help employers seeking these skills thrive in the local economy. So let me kick off then, as we dig into this, to talk a little bit about the research that we are launching today that is informing the work of the IoT, but also is really helping to showcase the importance of what they're doing. And so in this report, which is intended to be the first and the baseline report for a time series analysis over the next few years, exploring not just what the labour market looks like now, but how it's changing. And so this report was aimed at really defining and understanding what the labour market needs are in digital terms. So I will walk through some of the key findings. First and foremost, I'll start to quantify what the digital sector looks like in the region. And then we'll start to think about the sorts of roles that are driving that. And of course, there have been some quite significant shocks to the labour market through 2020, and so we wanted to illuminate a little bit of the very short-term view of what's happening as the COVID pandemic has been impacting on the labour market. And for the purposes of the report and the findings that I'm sharing today, we're focusing in on the core local region that the South Central IoT serves. That being the four LEP regions of Buckinghamshire, Oxfordshire, South East Midlands or SEMLEP, and Thames Valley, Berkshire. So let's first of all think about what the digital sector actually is, and we can use the standard industrial classification system to define the digital sector. It all sits within a headline information and communication sector, and that breaks down into its constituent parts that I've got on the screen in front here. So we can see a breakdown into different dimensions of the digital sector, and what we can see is the profile of jobs, a sector that is employing or was employing in 2020 over 110,000 people, with average earnings of over 50,000, and that equates to around about 20,000 workplaces. As you look across that list, we can see a range of different sectors, and certainly some dominant sectors locally, notably the computer consultancy and programming sectors, employing a significant proportion of that 110,000 or so jobs. And if we're thinking about earnings, then certainly that wireless telecoms activities sector is certainly the highest paying. And it's very interesting to see how those earnings do vary around the average for the region, for the sector as a whole, ranging from fairly low low level 15,500 in the computer facilities activities, through to the 66,000 per annum average in wireless telecoms activities. How's that changed? Well, there's certainly been significant growth over the last 10 years, both nationally, so that's the blue line, and the orange reflects the South Central region that we're looking at here. So we can see some steady growth there. I think it's quite interesting to look locally that growth is perhaps inclined to plateau, whilst still remains relatively high, and we can see a local concentration there. Nationally, steady growth year on year, which is probably not a surprise. It's interesting to think about relativity here. So it's a big sector nationally and of course a big sector locally, but how does it compare? We can use a factor called location quotient to help us understand the relative concentrations of certain industries locally. So location quotient, or LQ, as you can see on the graph there, compares the proportion of the workforce in a given sector in our area, our South Central area, compared to the national average profile. So it helps us understand where we have a higher than average concentration or lower than average concentration in different sector settings. So the left-hand chart, the orange chart, shows us the location quotient with a score of 1 being the national average. So anything to the right of that, the 1 line shows that we have a higher concentration, and what we can see is wireless telecoms activities coming out as a significantly highly concentrated sector. So over 3 times the workforce in this sector in the local region compared to the national average. And we can see that relates to around about pushing towards 7,000 jobs. We can see other sectors as well significantly above the 1 line, so above national average. They may not necessarily be high employing sectors like publishing of computer games, or even the reproduction of recorded media. But these are perhaps quite small industries, generally speaking, and the South Central region has a higher than expected concentration. In fact, it's only at the motion picture, satellite telecoms and web portals in those industries that we actually see a below national average concentration. So we can see there's quite a strong representation throughout, even where the numbers do vary greatly in absolute terms. Also interesting to note how each of these sectors has trended in the last 10 years. So we saw overall significant growth in the region. And actually, as we break it down into its constituent parts, so it's the blue lines on the right-hand side of the graph, we can see where there has been very rapid growth. So we can see where wireless telecoms not only is a high concentration, so a niche sector locally, but has grown significantly, over 300% in that 10-year period. The green line on those charts shows us how Great Britain has trended in that same time period. So of course has grown quite significantly nationally, but nothing compared to the local trends. And again, in most regions, in most sectors, sorry, we've seen stronger growth regionally, although there is a varied picture here again. So certainly a good focal area for the local economy. So it's one thing understanding the key industries, the sector that we're talking about here, but it is another to think about actually what we can do about it and what we need to do about it in skill terms. And actually, when we think about education, we think about employment, we think about new skills or upskilling. Actually, a big driver to this thinking really needs to be about the sorts of job roles that are driving a local economy, not necessarily the industry setting that they're found within, because it's those roles that actually undertake the work. So as well as thinking about the digital sector in broader terms, as we've just looked at there, it's actually really critical as we start to ask the question about what skills needs are there in our local economy to actually actually think about the core digital occupations that are driving the local economy. So here on the slide, we have a breakdown now, not of the industries or the types of employers that are driving the economy, but actually the digital occupations that we see most readily in the digital sector, but actually elsewhere as well. So we can see significant volumes of jobs in things like amongst programmers and software development professionals, IT managers, and broader telecoms professionals as well. But it's quite interesting to think about where those job roles are found. So on that left-hand side, we can see a profile of not just the volume of jobs in those different occupations locally, but actually think about what proportion of those are employed within the digital industry. So those are those orange bars, and what proportion are actually found in other industries, so non-digital industries. So we can see programmers and software development professionals, for example, that a good majority of them do, yes, work in the digital sector, but over 8,000 programmers are also employed in other sectors. So it's quite interesting to think about the proliferation and the spread of digital skills needs, not just within the digital sector, but actually across the economy as a whole. And certain occupations are clearly more prone to be found within the industry sector. So programmers, a high proportion, compared to, say, IT engineers, where we see a lower proportion of the workforce actually just employed in the digital sector alone. And it's a more common role that we typically find right across businesses, because a lot of businesses do rely on IT as part of their infrastructure, even if their core jobs aren't necessarily, and their core mission isn't an IT mission. And on the right hand side here, we can see then what that split is. So of course, a good majority of these jobs sit within the digital sector, and so understanding how those sectors are trending are really important to understanding where that demand lies. But we can also see other roles that also feed into other industries, and that's very helpful to think of the context within which the skills are going to be required. So whilst the core skills of an IT engineer or project manager might be similar, actually understanding the very niche employment setting of those skills are also going to be very important. And as we think in those terms, we can actually start to explore, well, what other sectors, what other industry groupings do employ these digital occupations. And so the chart now on the screen here starts to illuminate where else we might find those digital skills. So we've isolated on the top row there the digital sector, and of course we can see the lighter colours showing the higher percentages in that sector across the different digital roles we've identified along the bottom there. But really interesting to pick out some other sectors. So for example, as we move into the realms of telecoms engineers and TV video engineers, we can see actually the construction sector is a large employer of those roles. Similarly, looking at manufacturing, that actually brings in more of the electrical and electronics side, where we find demand for employment there. And actually professional and business services, of course, is another large employer of digital occupations in the local region as well. Similarly, retail services and logistics, picking up on the IT engineers and support. Of course, e-commerce, a big and rapidly growing sector right now. And for those that are from the South Central region, or those that travel up and down the M1, as you pass by Milton Keynes and Bedford, will see the big warehousing and logistics infrastructure that is ever more becoming reliant on technology as a key driver. So this analysis hopefully does start to flag up the fact that it's not a sort of a black and white cut and dry world when it comes to digital jobs. We have obviously a core digital sector, and one of the key drivers of the IoT is to understand how we can support that labour market, but we also need to respect the fact that digital jobs are found right across the labour market, and this will vary by different regions. Other areas maybe not so reliant on the logistics side and e-commerce side won't see that showing up in their areas, but as I said earlier, it's a key factor for South Central region. As we think about the labour market, we can also think about the demographic profile of workers and how that varies across the labour market. So there is, as I'm sure you'll be aware, not a uniform profile of demographics. So here on the slide, we've lent into understanding those key different digital roles. To think about both the age profile of workers in those roles and the gender profile as well, so we can see where there are perhaps biases in the labour market. So on the slides here, we've got the age ranges on the up and down on the left-hand side, and then we have the bars are coloured by gender, so the blue bars are males, and we can see right across the piece really, and if you look in the bottom right, we've got the aggregate of all occupations, a significant dominance of male workers within tech digital roles. That does vary slightly by different roles. At the engineering end, it's even more pronounced. So if we look at IT engineers in there, and slightly less so on the web design and development professionals. We can also see, generally speaking, a bias towards younger workforce in general. However, that does again vary by role, and we can see, for example, the pre-press technicians, a significantly older profile of workforce, which of course presents an interesting retirement replacement challenge as well. I should add, and as explained in the report, data on workforce demographics often is this level of occupation really should be undertaken at a national level because of the sample size of the different data collection techniques. So these are national trends, but we tend to generally see a fairly uniform profile as we dig into the data across the regions. So the national data is as good an indicator as any, but clearly shows that there's a somewhat of an imbalance, and I know is a big focus for the IoT and South Central IoT in terms of trying to address some of this through the new talent coming into the labour market. So an interesting benchmark there. So that was a little kind of positioning of the key industries and those jobs, those occupations that are driving the makeup of the labour market. Of course, though, we are facing a pretty critical and challenging time for the labour market right now, as the COVID pandemic bites and lockdowns and other things kind of have quite a significant impact on not just unemployment, but also employer demand. And so the next couple of slides really dive into a bit more of a contemporary trend for those key occupations that we've just identified, with a view to working through seeing if we can understand what's happening in the short term for those roles, as well as understanding what the constituent makeup of the region is. The chart on the screen that you see in front of you here is mapping unique active job postings. So we're collating online job posting activity and identifying the different roles that are driving active hiring adverts. And this trend shows on a similar scale how those digital occupations have been trending in terms of posting activity from the beginning of the year. So we start at January, we can see it dropped away from March as lockdown came, and that obviously stifled a lot of hiring activity in the labour market, hitting a low in June, but seeing things pick up again as restrictions eased, and we saw through the summer recommencement of hiring activity again. Now it's interesting to see that the digital jobs seem to have lagged a little behind the wider labour market, and I think that's to some extent a real big focus we've seen in the labour market towards hiring in the health field to manage through the pandemic, the front end of the pandemic, and also a quite significant pickup in logistics and e-commerce and those industries that, of course, have adapted very quickly to meet a changing need in the labour market. But the good news is that, of course, whilst there was a significant slowing down, things have picked back up again in hiring terms, not quite yet reaching those same heights as pre-lockdown 1.0. And actually, if we look into the details of that to try and unpick this, it actually makes for some quite interesting reading. So the active postings stock is made up of new postings that are coming in and being advertised by employers, but of course there are existing job postings that remain open and active. And one of the things that we've been keeping an eye on and noticed certainly through this pandemic phase has been that a number of job postings have just been in effect frozen. They've been just kept open throughout the whole period, but the new posting activity, perhaps new opportunities that were coming up had slowed down a bit. It's interesting actually, as we now look at a phase where we've been coming out of that initial lockdown. We saw an increase in postings expiring, so perhaps those postings that have now been filled or are no longer required. So the blue bars there we can see have increased, but that actually masks a continuation of growth in new postings coming in. So that's pretty good news in the sense that plenty of new postings are being advertised. I suppose the one thing we do need to keep an eye on over the coming weeks and month or so, of course, is what impact this second national lockdown in England has had. It's a little early to tell, but actually to see the postings, the new postings rising, hopefully that is a good sign. But we'll need to keep an eye on that as the data comes through. So that's kind of a run through of some of the key findings of the report. This is where I very much hope Alex has been able to join us. Debbie, do we have any word from Alex at all?
No, we don't. I think he's disappeared.
Okay, so I am going to attempt to present his slides and do probably a very bad job at it. I apologize, Alex, if you're somewhere out there joining us, but I'm going to attempt to kind of walk through some of your items, and it might be that we need to revisit some of these dimensions. But I know the key really, of course, of any analysis on the labour market, of course, is the interpretation and translation into activity. And so I think this is the exciting thing that we're in the work that Emsi and the South Central IoT are undertaking is very much the data that we hold at Emsi really illuminates what is happening, and particularly in local labour markets, as we've just seen. Then the great challenge is translating that into action and ultimately reliable, valuable course content that will really help students moving through the IoT programs and pathways seek successful employment and career direction. And so the second component of the report that's coming out really doubles down on some really key pathways that the IoT are progressing building content around. So we'll discover a little bit about that. Now this slide is quite a difficult one for me to try and explain, but it looks pretty. So we'll move on and actually talk about.
Hi Andy, sorry, it's Alex Warner.
Well, hey, we have you. Brilliant. So, Thank you for rescuing me.
We've got everywhere sound going at the moment. So can I just triple check which slide you're talking about, the job posting analytics at the moment?
So I have just completed, I've just completed my run through, and we're moving on to your slide where we're talking about ultimately how employer demand is aligning into the pathways, the key pathways. Then your focus on employment, future potential, and ultimately skills. So I can certainly walk through the slide as we move to your.
Yeah, so let's pause there and let's talk about our curriculum then. So in terms of curriculum and what it is that we've developed, whenever we talk about how we've developed our curriculum, we talk about reverse engineering, and specifically reverse engineering having worked with employers. So a traditional curriculum, as focused at the sort of this top line, and teaching and learning might be qualification focused. You have a teacher or instructor. You obviously study for building knowledge, you have some employer input, you have assessment, and ultimately that will determine the certificate and your graduation. However, when I talk about reverse engineering of curriculum, what we really mean by that is we are driven by employers. It's employer-led. We develop engaging experiences to build new thinking. It's hands-on. It's practical. Students will be problem-solving, and then we have a qualification to match the experience, and finally the assessment. And students will leave the Institute of Technology with a portfolio and CV that reflects the experiences before they graduate. So in a nutshell, what we've developed is a bespoke curriculum focused on project-based learning, specifically understanding of business issues. It will be delivered by dual professionals, and what we mean by dual professionals is those industry partners who are coming on site. So they are industry experts, but we are supporting them in terms of developing their pedagogic knowledge and how to impart knowledge, and will be underpinned by those employer partnerships and really focus on developing those industry ready and professional skills. So if we move on then to have a look at each of the 5 pathways, what you see on this particular side is the job postings analytics. So essentially what we have here is the list of technical skills that we've developed within curriculum and mapped them to appropriate jobs. So this particular table, it outlines the technical skills that we have in curriculum, but also combines it with Emsi's skills library. And what we call this is our language of skills for each individual pathway. So we've identified the skills terms, and it enables us to develop future insight or further insights in terms of job posting analytics and looking at some of those soft skills that students need to develop within their pathway, and essentially the behaviours that they need to be that they'll need for a career trajectory and to determine their success. So if we move on to what that means then in curriculum, we have 5 individual pathways. We have data analytics, we have security, cybersecurity, we have games, animation, programming and software development, and then networking and cloud infrastructure. And you can see on the left-hand side how we've split our curriculum and the curriculum development into 3 parts. That is commercial, technical, and that personalised pathway. And the reason why we've done this is because irrespective of the pathway that students are on, they're all going to need that sort of underpinning commercial acumen that will enable them to operate in those professional environments. And essentially it supports that readiness for work. If we're then talking about the next row down and technical, again, we refer to this as our technical span. So security, programming, analytics, and networking. So those skills that are required irrespective of the subject discipline or industry. And what we mean by those are those interdisciplinary or multidisciplinary requirements that students will have within their pathway, but they will enable them to have understanding of those inextricable links between all of the others. And then finally, the personalisation aspect, it really refers to an individual's personal career ambitions to lay foundations, obviously, for their sector discipline, and really sharpen their focus for career readiness. So I'm going to focus on here security, which has cryptography, security in the cloud, forensics in the cloud, and advanced security in the cloud. Or in terms of our software development pathway, it's database design and development, software development life cycles, data structures, algorithms, and advanced programming as well. So if we move on then and we have a look at each of the each of the individual pathways, then what I'm going to do here is really bring to life what it is that we've been doing. So just for a bit of orientation, on the left-hand side, you have EMSI's language of skills, so those technical skills. On the right-hand side there, those are those modules of study that we sequence to build the overall pathway. And in the centre here, these are the technical and the soft skills that have been developed using EMSI's job posting analytics, specifically looking at those qualities or attributes that are required of individuals to be successful. And I'm going to give you an example of how we've done this with working with one of our partners, Sainsbury's. So Sainsbury's are sponsoring a data analytics pathway, and our students are doing what we call Project COVID-19. And essentially, they'll be understanding the analytics of decision making, so forecasting and decision analysis, and understanding the supply and demand challenges that Sainsbury's faced during lockdown 1. And essentially, the students will be required to make those critical business decisions to support the ongoing operation, and essentially what Sainsbury's had to do, which was to keep the nation fed. So ultimately, students will undertake hindsight analysis, developing insights from the data, and obviously presenting back to Sainsbury's colleagues, foresighting and forecasting to ensure that everyone remained fed, or as we had it in lockdown 1, everyone had sufficient toilet roll. So students are really developing those soft skills, and as we can see here, communication is one of those most pivotal to that data and analytics pathway. If we then have a quick look at the security pathway, again, just for orientation purposes, those job posting analytics and technical skills are on the left. On the right-hand side is curriculum, and then in the centre is those in-demand, what we call soft and hard skills, or sort of soft and technical skills. And I'm going to talk to you here about how we've worked with industry partner Evidence Talks, and our students have been working on what we call Project Crime Scene Investigation, and students will be working from lab to jury. What they will undertake is basic digital forensics training for the purpose of solving crimes. They'll use knowledge of an individual's digital footprint to present the technical forensics information to non-technical audiences, essentially exactly what Evidence Talks have to do, which is prepare information for the purpose of a jury in order for them to be able to make decisions. So again, within curriculum, we are simulating what our providers, Evidence Talks, do, obviously in that safe or theoretical environment. So if we move on and have a look at the games and animation pathway, then again we have the left-hand side is that sort of technical, the right hand is the curriculum, and then in the centre is the soft skills. It's specifically here we're working with Bedfordshire-based retro games. And our students are working to digitally remaster some classics. For those gamers amongst you, we're working on Espionage Island. So students have a live brief. They are bringing, I shouldn't say bringing back to life, they are remastering the classics. So designing different levels into the game which don't currently exist. We're creating 3D models. So bearing in mind this is an 80s production. And then we're using Unity Games Engine to bring these together in an interactive user experience. So students are currently developing working prototypes. They are reimagining the TEDx Spectrum game, Espionage Island, and they will be presenting these back to retro games with the potential of republishing content creatively. So there's sort of the entrepreneurial opportunity for our students as well to really demonstrate their creativity. If we move on to software development and programming, you can see, again, orientation, the language skills on the left, the curriculum on the right, and in the centre, what is it that those students who are studying on the software development pathway, what is it that they need to develop? Well, we're really proud to be working with McAfee, the device-to-cloud security experts. And what our students have been doing, working with McAfee colleagues, is developing code, enable them to undertake a manual scan to identify potential vulnerabilities. Essentially what our students are doing is they've developed with a written code, they're deploying it for the purpose of scanning an S3 bucket, which is an open source folder. And then what they will do is look for any potential vulnerabilities within that folder itself. So for example, if it's pattern recognition within a spreadsheet and understanding the links that may have, for example, someone's credit card details. And students will be able to deploy code to look for these vulnerabilities. Again, a microcosm of the work that McAfee are undertaking, and students having to not only deploy, but also then debug and then communicate and present their findings as well. So if we move on to the fifth and final pathway, which is networking and cloud infrastructure, our students are working with KPMG and specifically supporting help desk activities. So putting theory into practice, working in teams as a troubleshooting resource unit, as they would do in industry, and exactly the way in terms of KPMG's digital team would respond. So again, we've developed those real world scenarios, and students are developing solutions to help support problems, sort of identifying and overcoming them. Again, that final point that I just wanted to make, which is looking at the labour market alignment, developing those skills that underpin the career trajectory, and developing the necessary knowledge, skills and behaviours. So if we move on, Andy, I'm going to pause here and give and just say there is an opportunity for me to sort of go back and talk about some of the opening slides. I didn't unfortunately have access to what you were presenting at the start, but before I presented these final few slides, I wondered whether it was possible to sort of go back and just provide a little bit of overarching context.
Yeah, please do, because I probably made a complete hash of it in trying to fill time. So I would love for you to tell us a bit more. And I will.
Yeah, great, thank you. So if we have a look at the Institute of Technology on slide number 2 then. So this graphic essentially shows those Wave 1 Institutes of Technology. It was in 2017, the government's industrial strategy, Building a Britain Fit for the Future, outlined the investment to develop these higher technical education institutions. Essentially, these institutions were going to be based in either colleges or universities and have that local industry specialism, and use the expertise of their relevant employers to be able to shape and deliver curriculum. So for the purpose of this slide, number 6, for example, refers to North East Institute of Technology in Durham, involves Newcastle University and Nissan with a specialism in digital advanced manufacturing, or for example, number 8, Southwest Institute of Technology at the University of Exeter, a number of further education colleges, and their employers including Babcock and the Met Office. Their specialism is digital engineering and manufacturing. So if we go on to slide number 3 then, and talk about the South Central Institute of Technology, you'll notice our location specific area across that Oxford Cambridge arc, but also having a campus in Reading. We are a digitally focused Institute of Technology. You'll recognise that from our anchor partners. So, for example, Microsoft, KPMG, McAfee, Evidence Talks, HEI, higher education provider is Cranfield, and those delivery partners are Milton Keynes College and Activate Learning. And we have 3 locations of the South Central Institute of Technology. One in Bletchley on the original footprint of the heritage Bletchley Park. We have at the Milton Keynes College site, and then we have sites in Oxford and Reading at Activate Learning sites. So we've looked at the anchor partners, but we also have 80 further partners who are supporting the overall development of the IoT, with the ambition by year 5, so the 2025 academic year, delivering to 1,500 learners across those 3 sites. So why IoT then, and the focus on our purpose and values? So our purpose is to inspire digital futures, and our values are to include, to innovate and connect and to challenge. And specifically with regards to inclusion, we want to create opportunities within and for our entire community, where everyone knows that they belong and that they matter, where we're going to celebrate that diversity amongst the community. We innovate, we want to be different by design, and we want to challenge the status quo of how higher technical education is currently delivered. We'll connect in terms of working with our wider ecosystem, where we want to be greater than the sum of our parts. We want to be leading thinkers who are supporting industry and developing those partnerships to be able to deliver an outstanding experience. And then in terms of our challenge, we have ambition combined with high expectations of obviously ourselves and community and our community to really make a difference. So what does that mean in terms of our aim then? So essentially, we want to plug the digital skills gap, we want to understand business needs, and we want to create unrivaled talent. So specifically with regards to that digital skills gap, we know that students leave university with academic understanding, but they are lacking that real world work experience. So we are offering that industry-like experience to prepare our students, to enable them to develop those soft skills, those attributes or qualities that enable them to be successful in the employment place. We understand business needs. So 46% of employers believe that most new graduates are not equipped to take up careers in the digital sector. So we're working closely with those partners to really understand what it is that they're looking for from future talent, and making sure that we reverse engineer curriculum to develop those in-demand skills. And then finally, that creation of talent. So we are developing project-based learning experiences with our employers. We have dual professionals, so those industry professionals co-delivering with us, supporting that both industry knowledge, academic knowledge, and combining it with those professional and personal skills that will support an individual as well. So if we were to go back to my placeholder and then look at why we are here. So really, that's just to reaffirm that message about plugging the digital skills gap, to understand the business need, and to create an unrivaled talent. What you'll have heard from Andy, and obviously what you'll have heard from a small amount in terms from myself from curriculum, we are working hand in glove with those partners to be able to develop systems. Nevertheless, we recognise the scale of the challenge which is ahead of us. And in terms of the UK tech sector, currently that 16% are female, and this ratio is not improved in the last 10 years. 4% of those of professionals are people of colour, and within that statistic, there are particular underrepresented groups, for example, black individuals. We have many neurodiverse individuals within the sector who are not currently supported, and we know that in terms of senior roles, we have middle class, middle-aged white men, and those stereotypes of the geek or the gamer. So going back to our vision and why the Institute of Technology then. So we want to be a place where everyone is included, knows that they belong and knows that they matter, and they can be their authentic self to achieve their full potential. We want to be representative of the community that we serve. We want to be proactive in ending prejudice and injustice wherever it is found. And we also want to become a diversity and inclusion role model for those other organisations to improve that downstream diversity and inclusion through our partners as well. So if we move on then in terms of our concluding thoughts, so where do we find ourselves now, and what is it that you will have heard today? Well, there is no doubting the immediate impact that the COVID-19 pandemic has presented for all of us. Furthermore, in that medium to longer term future, we need to also think about the UK's exit from the European Union, the impact that will have on people and skills within the region. Nevertheless, what I hope you've heard today is that we remain optimistic for the region, and looking forward, we see that the Institute of Technology can play a part in responses, and we want to support the community overcoming those challenges. What you'll have heard in a very small soundbite from myself is that we are developing the curriculum that develops those industry-ready individuals, that focuses on the knowledge, skills and behaviours to ensure that when local employers recruit from our student cohorts, that they know they have individuals who can hit the ground running. We are optimistic in terms of where we find ourselves now. The report will tell you that we opened our doors in September this year, and we're already working towards our values, specifically inclusion, innovation, connection and challenge. But just to shine a spotlight on inclusion, of those 50 individuals who have started studying with us this academic year, 52% of those are from Black, Asian, minority ethnic groups. 35% have disclosed a learning difference, and 22% are female. So we recognise that talent is everywhere, but opportunity is not, and we really want to understand and work with the labour market to be able to drive those opportunities. Nevertheless, we recognise that still there is more that needs to be done. This report has enabled us to shine the light on the gender inequalities in the digital sector, but future iterations of the report will also measure the impact that we're making, measuring all those diverse groups who we seek to serve. We are developing opportunity. We can support the regional labour market. We recognise the part that we can play in skilling, reskilling and upskilling, and our curriculum is built with opportunity in mind. With regards to that opportunity, it would be remiss of me not to mention, we obviously have full-time, part-time, apprenticeship and professional courses. We have higher apprenticeship places starting in January this year, software development from our Reading site, and we have data analyst places still available from our Bletchley site. We collectively recognise that we can come together. We want to lead responses, create opportunity, and hopefully realise that productivity and prosperity that we know that the South Central region has been recognised for over recent years.
Great,
So,
thank you.
that was everything from me. What I did want to do was to take this opportunity just to say a few thank yous. First off, thank you to everyone for persevering with this afternoon's call and my lateness. At some point, I'll be able to share with you some of the challenges that we've faced. But specifically, I wanted to do a quick round of thank yous, obviously for Andy, first and foremost for holding the fort today. What a sterling job I understand that he's done. We have Rob and Debbie in the marketing team and everyone behind the scenes at Emsi who support the development of this report. As specific partners, we've got, worthy of note, we've got Colin Marshall from KPMG, who supported us in the early round of development, Elizabeth Sheldon from Evidence Talks, who has supported the development of the report. You'll see an executive summary from Elizabeth. And then finally, from Milton Keynes College, I just wanted to give a huge thank you to Ellie, our Marketing and Communications Manager, but specifically also those members of the project team who supported numerous revisions and sort of proofreading. I just wanted to say it's been a pleasure working with you all, and thank you for your time, efforts and energies.
Thank you very much, Alex. And can I offer a personal thank you for being so resilient in finding a way amongst a technological challenge in digging me out of a very sticky hole there. So thank you very much for that. And just if I might add some thoughts from myself, obviously Emsi from a labour market data perspective, it's great to be able to really zero in and focus on some core challenges and to be at the forefront and the front end of, I think, a very exciting program of activity that you guys are leading on. So I'm very excited to see how the data that we're providing translates into the sorts of action that you were describing that's already happening, and how that will ultimately change the labour outlook for the communities that you're serving. There, I'm very excited to be tracking the progress of that over the coming years in support of the Institute of Technology, for sure, and excited to see the outcomes for your students and ultimately your labour market. As you say, whilst on the surface is a buoyant labour market and only heading in one real direction, I think there is still plenty of work to do to ensure it's an inclusive labour market, and that starts with you guys. The other thing I think that will come out as we dig into the details of the report and the analysis, but also the nature of how you've built your programs, I think it's going to be very interesting as to how the world of education continues to adapt in the face of the situation we're in and the disruptions that you mentioned coming down the line. And there's one thing for sure when it comes to the labour market, which is there are always disruptions. There's always needs to adapt and change. And I think it's very interesting, as I certainly set out, the headlines of understanding that digital jobs can be found, yes, in the digital sector, but proliferate right across the labour market. I think as you think about the labour market in skill terms, and those skills and components that you so eloquently took us through, at that level we find that they will be found in even broader terms right across the labour market. And so you're building some really interesting foundations, I think, as the world changes around us to be able to adapt as you say, not just about new talent coming in, but upskilling and reskilling existing workers. So yeah, very excited to watch from afar and see how that progresses. Let me just, Debbie, do we have any questions that have come in on the chat that you want to sort of maybe throw towards Alex or myself?
We have one especially for Alex, which just asks that, did you get the information for the top 10 most in-demand hard and soft skills for each track from the employer partnership or from EMSI?
So within the specific slides where we have the that they are from the data scrape from EMSI. So specifically, that is the EMSI's what they call the language of skills. So that will be unpacked further in the report. So you'll be able to see exactly where they've come from. So in terms of how they have been developed, so we presented the curriculum, or for those of you who are interested in terms of how you develop this insight. So we presented the curriculum to EMSI. We mapped our curriculum to a SCIoT framework, so the skills framework for the information age, to look at some of those technical and hard skills that students will be developed. We've shared those with EMSI. We've also worked with an organisation called Skills Builder to look at some of those more soft skills, and again shared them with EMSI. And EMSI have then done the big data or the data scrape to compile the top 10.
Great. That's really useful. Thank you. And just one other question. How do young people who don't live near the Institute of Technology enroll at FE, or is it better that they do it at HE when they're older? Does that make sense?
So I will answer this probably in a couple of parts. So first off, digital is not going anywhere. One of the things that I didn't say in my presentation, but there are very few sectors that are set to grow through 2020. But when the pandemic hit, when we talk about businesses pivoting, they all pivoted to digital. So anyone who is interested in exploring their career pathways, I would be may come across as somewhat biased, but all the information that we have today presents that digital is going to be a very exciting and a growing sector to go into. So do you need to wait or do you need to study? You can pick up computing or computer sciences from primary aged education. So I would always recommend that individuals have some level of computing knowledge. We'd be delighted to support people through the South Central Institute of Technology. But if you aren't we are focused on higher technical education. If you aren't currently 18 or above, so to access higher education, there are many opportunities for you to continue to upskill and sort of develop your talents in this field. I don't know who sent in that question, but I'd be really delighted to share some more information about how you might be able to do that, looking at, for example, code clubs that you could do, some online learning and upskilling, because there is so much content available now that everyone should really start to develop their sort of passion in this area, because it's only going to grow.
Great. Okay. Well, what I'll do is we'll do that offline. We'll send over an email to Sam so that can link you two up. Okay. And that's all the questions. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. So thanks very much, Alex, and thank you, Debbie, for hosting us. Thanks, everyone, for joining us, and we will review the questions, as Debbie mentions, and hope to come back to you with more specific answers, or if we didn't get to answer your question in this session, but we've just run out of time now. So thank you, Alex, thank you, Debbie, and thank you all. We will be circulating the report and a recording of this session shortly. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Andy.